Thank you, Chairman Wilson, and thank you all for being here and the extraordinary work you're doing to address this issue. We all know how very challenging it is, and we've been hearing some of the conversations about how to minimize the stigma associated with seeking out help. And this summer, as we were back in our districts, I had the opportunity to meet with a young man who had just returned from Afghanistan. He was an extraordinary young man. I was so impressed by him. And his task had been to be the driver in the lead of the convoy whose job it was to go out and find IEDs. And so as he had come back, he recognized he needed to get some help, that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he alluded to it. He said, you know, I know there's sort of still a stigma associated with it, but he recognized that he really did need to get some help. And just a quick story he told me was that because in that role he played, his task was to drive very, very slowly. And as he was back in the civilian world, out driving his family's car, he was stopped by a police officer, not because he was driving too fast, but because he was driving too slow. So it does take time for our young troops to come back and reintegrate and sort of absorb the fact that they're now in a very different environment. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing to help them in that transition and to hopefully transition to a very safe place for them and for their families. But I wanted to ask a slightly different question. Secretary Woodson, in your written testimony, you've spoken about the importance of data collection through the Department of Defense Suicide Event Report system, and how that data collection system helps the DoD target prevention strategies. And we've heard questions around just how important it is that we have real facts to sort of assess the work that you all are doing. But is the DoD currently collecting data on suicides among female service members? If it is, what is the findings? And is the DoD currently looking at a causal relationship between military sexual trauma and suicide? Because we do know, and it's another issue that this committee has had to deal with, the extraordinary prevalence of military sexual trauma. A study conducted by a researcher at Portland State University that was published in December 2010 found that female veterans, age 18 to 34, are 3 times as likely as their civilian peers to die by suicide. And we have anecdotal evidence of a number of suicide attempts that are related to military sexual trauma. As we are too painfully aware, and as we often discuss here, as many as 1 in 3 women leaving military service report that they have experienced some form of military sexual trauma. In the civilian world, victims of sexual assault are 4 times as likely to contemplate suicide than people who have not experienced this kind of trauma. So again, my question in the context of data collection, are you looking at the prevalence of suicide among female veterans and for service members, and any causal relationship between being a survivor of military sexual trauma and suicide?
Thank you for that important question. And the answer is yes. We would hope as the database matures that we will be able to dissect out a number of different demographics and subgroups. As you know, there is a separate effort to look at the whole strategy about sexual assaults in the military. We do know that mental health problems arise at a much higher frequency in individuals who have experienced sexual abuse or sexual assault. And so we've redoubled our effort to make available to these individuals mental health counselors so that they can get the type of care that they need and assessed for their risk of suicide. To date, and I'll take for the record, I have not heard of any directly related death by suicide as a result of sexual assault. But as I said, I'll take for the record to ensure that I am speaking true facts. But let me just say that we consider this a very important set of issues, and we'll be examining this problem as well.
But by gender, you're not collecting data separately to sort of track the prevalence of the numbers of men who are committing suicide versus the numbers of women.
Oh, yes.
You are?
Yes.
You are. So you are segregating that information by gender.
Yes.
That'd be interesting to get a report on how that breaks down.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Tsongas. We now proceed to Colonel West of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, also Ranking